Police in northern Oregon are overwhelmed by a string of brutal murders. At first glance, the cases appear unrelated. But as victims continue to surface, the investigation begins to expose a more terrifying truth. A quiet town in central California becomes the backdrop of a violent double homicide. With no witnesses and little physical evidence, investigators struggle to identify a suspect. To make their case, police must rely on determination, ingenuity, and a little luck. When death comes at the hands of a stranger, investigators depend on the physical evidence to make their case. Forensic science offers the only hope of justice when innocent victims are caught in a killer's deadly aim. Only 16 miles from Portland, the quiet town of Hillsboro, Oregon feels far away from the problems of big city life.
91,482.
But a few hours before dawn on October 9, 1992, dispatchers from the Hillsboro Police Department received a 911 call. A resident living along Cornell Road reported hearing multiple gunshots. Police arrived at the scene to find an abandoned 1966 Volkswagen Beetle pulled up onto the sidewalk. The car was riddled with bullets. Shattered glass, a purse, and traces of blood littered the front seat. Over a dozen bullet casings were scattered on the ground. In the glove compartment, police found the vehicle's registration. The car belonged to a woman named Martha Bryant. A driver's license found inside the purse also belonged to her. But Martha Bryant was nowhere to be found. As officers tried to piece together what had happened, another call came in from police dispatch.
Yeah, go ahead.
Half a mile away, witnesses reported a woman lying bleeding in the road.
Don't see any exit wound. Check her breathing, respiration.
The officer arrived to find paramedics frantically working to save the woman's life. He recognized her from the driver's license photo. It was the owner of the Volkswagen, Martha Bryant. She had been shot twice. The emergency team rushed her to the University Hospital in Portland. But after several hours of fighting for her life, 41-year-old Martha Bryant was pronounced dead. Later that morning, authorities contacted her husband. He couldn't imagine anyone wanting to harm her. He said that Martha was a dedicated midwife at the hospital where she worked.
You want to hold her?
It wasn't unusual for her to be at the hospital well into the morning hours, helping families bring new life into the world. Martha Bryant just didn't seem to have any enemies. At autopsy, the medical examiner noticed signs that Martha Bryant had been sexually assaulted. A single 9mm bullet had pierced her lung. But it was an execution-style shot from a .22 caliber weapon to her right temple that killed her. the slugs were removed and forwarded to the crime lab.
Number 4.
30 degrees.
Criminalists at the Oregon State Police Crime Lab began scouring the Volkswagen for clues.
2 is
Number 1, 20 degrees.
Trajectory analysis showed that Martha Bryant had driven through a hail of bullets.
Number 5, 30 degrees.
okay.
Examiners determined that 17 rounds had pierced the car. The attack had come from 2 positions. From the right rear of the vehicle and from just outside the passenger window. It looked like an all-out ambush by someone determined
Like
to
a
kill
copper
her.
jacketed 9mm.
Next, examiners compared the bullets collected from the vehicle to those recovered from the victim. They matched. And the markings left on the bullets told investigators that a Browning 9mm handgun had probably fired them. Examiners also confirmed that the fatal shot to the victim's head had been fired from a different weapon, a .22 caliber handgun. This suggested 2 shooters. With no motive and no obvious suspects, Hillsborough police believed this would be a difficult case to solve. Detective Michael O'Connell of the nearby Washington County Sheriff's Department was asked to assist in the investigation.
It was extremely unusual, the extreme violent nature of it, the senseless, random nature of it. It was unlike anything that we had had, or unlike anything that had happened even in the whole Portland metropolitan area.
News of Martha Bryant's murder sent shockwaves through the community. The public came forward with dozens of tips, but they all led nowhere. 2 months after the shooting, the Martha Bryant investigation ground to a halt. But Detective O'Connell refused to let this senseless murder go unsolved. Believing that Martha Bryant had been randomly targeted, O'Connell began reviewing another cold case he was working from a year earlier. That victim also seemed to have been targeted by a stranger. He began looking for signs that the 2 cases may be connected. On April 19, 1991, Washington County investigators were dispatched to the home of an elderly Hillsborough resident. There, they discovered 62-year-old Margaret Schmidt.
You can get in that angle there.
She had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and then suffocated with a pillow. The only piece of evidence recovered from the scene was a man's size 8.5 Reebok sneaker print left in some spilt talcum powder. The subsequent investigation into Margaret Schmidt's murder had uncovered no solid suspects.
Margaret Schmidt had no enemies, led a very quiet lifestyle. There were no actual witnesses that night to this person sneaking into her house. Other than the shoe prints, we had nothing else to go on.
After reviewing the case file, O'Connell could find no similarities between the 2 murders. The MO in each was radically different. The only thing that Martha Bryant and Margaret Schmidt shared in common was that both appeared to be unlikely victims. Still, investigators at the Washington County Sheriff's Department needed to find a way to close these 2 investigations. And their caseload was about to increase. 2 months after Martha Bryant's murder, a passing truck driver spotted something on the side of the road. As he got closer, he realized he had found the lifeless body of a young woman. He immediately called the Washington County Sheriff's Department. Detective Scott Ryan received the call.
The information that we had at that point was not specific. The people on the scene did not know if it was the victim of a hit and run or if the body had been dumped for some other reason.
When officers arrived at the scene, they found that the victim had been shot at point-blank range from underneath her chin by a .22 caliber pistol. She had also been badly beaten and sexually assaulted. But other than the bullet used to kill her, no physical evidence was recovered. Investigators had no idea who this woman was or why she had been murdered. Hoping to identify her, the victim's fingerprints were run through the police database. They got a hit. Records indicated this victim had been charged on a minor violation a few years earlier. She was identified as 23-year-old Shantee Woodman of Portland, Oregon. Detectives interviewed Woodman's friends, but no one had any useful information. She was known as a free spirit, and everyone police spoke with liked her. Like the Margaret Schmidt and Martha Bryant investigations, the murder of Shantee Woodman quickly threatened to go cold. To keep the number of unsolved murders from growing higher, Washington County authorities organized a task force comprised of officers from area law enforcement agencies. The difference in the ages of the victims and the different MO in each murder led the team to conclude these cases were unrelated. And though a .22 caliber handgun had been used in 2 of the murders, examiners at the lab concluded they were different weapons. For the next several months, police followed hundreds of leads in each of the 3 unsolved cases. But despite their efforts, little progress was made. And then, new reports of violence began to pour in. The normally quiet community of Hillsborough seemed to be caught up in a deadly crime wave. As police in Hillsborough, Oregon struggled to keep pace with the growing number of unsolved homicides in their community, a new rash of assaults were being reported. Investigators learned that 2 elderly women had been attacked in separate incidents. Police spoke with one of the victims, who was still recovering in the hospital. She said a man came to her door asking to use a phone. Once inside, he attacked her. But the woman managed to activate an alarm pendant. The assailant panicked and fled. The woman was certain that her attacker was a man who used to live in her apartment building. 30-year-old Caesar Baroni. The second victim was also able to identify Baroni as her assailant. A warrant was issued for his arrest. Investigators quickly tracked Baroni to a local bar. He was placed under arrest for the 2 assaults.
Stand up, please. Put your hands on the bar.
Unlike the unsolved murders of Margaret Schmidt, Martha Bryant, and Shantee Woodman, it seemed the latest rash of violence would be quickly resolved.
You are being questioned. You cannot afford to hire a lawyer. One will be appointed to represent you.
At the weekly task force meeting, Detective O'Connell learned about Baroni and details of the recent assaults. Baroni had an extensive felony record, which included a number of assaults and rapes on elderly women. As he continued listening, Detective O'Connell realized that the MO of the recent assaults bore striking similarities to one of the unsolved murders, that of 62-year-old Margaret Schmidt.
Right away, we're speculating, could he be responsible, at the very least, for the murder of Margaret Schmidt, because of the age of these victims that survived and the fact that the one victim lived only a block away from Margaret Schmidt.
How you doing?
Though it was only a hunch that the cases may be connected, detectives interviewed Baroni in jail. He claimed he had never heard of Margaret Schmidt and denied any involvement in the recent assaults on the elderly women. Having been positively identified, investigators were convinced that Baroni was lying.
Glock 37.
Looking for any useful information, they asked him if he owned any weapons.
I've got an AK-47.
To their surprise, he admitted to owning several.
Semi-automatic. I've got
One, he said, was a Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Investigators had been searching for the same type of gun in connection with the shooting death of 41-year-old midwife Martha Bryant. The hunch that Baroni was connected to the murder of Margaret Schmidt had uncovered a possible link to another unsolved case. Looking for evidence that could tie Baroni to the two murders, police obtained a warrant to search the house he shared with a roommate.
Showed up at the same time as the night.
The man led them to Baroni's Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol.
Let's go ahead and take this one.
We sent that gun in to be test fired and compared to the Martha Bryant ballistics evidence. But at that time, it was only a hunch. There was nothing that directly led us to believe that he killed Martha Bryant.
Police continued searching for evidence that could tie Baroni to the unsolved murders. In his bedroom, they found another potentially vital clue. A pair of Reebok tennis shoes, the same type of shoe that had left the print at the Margaret Schmidt crime scene. At the crime lab, examiners analyzed the shoes recovered from Baroni's house. They were determined to be Reebok ERS tennis shoes, size 8.5. Examiners overlaid Baroni's shoes onto transparencies of the print lifted from Margaret Schmidt's house. The unique characteristics present on the treads of Baroni's shoes were identical to those found at the crime scene. Examiners concluded that Baroni's shoe had left the print. Speculating that they had inadvertently exposed a serial killer, investigators turned to the gun recovered from Baroni's house, the one suspected in the shooting of Martha Bryant. Criminalist Chris Johnson fired the Browning 9mm weapon into a water recovery tank. Under a comparison microscope, the samples were compared to the 9mm bullets recovered from Martha Bryant's lung and from her Volkswagen. Detective O'Connell was contacted and given the results of the analysis.
Chris Johnson test fired that Browning 9mm pistol and determined that that gun and that gun alone had fired those bullets removed from her Volkswagen and had ejected those casings found along Cornell Road, to the exclusion of any other gun in the universe. It was an absolute, solid, positive match.
this side.
Though it was powerful evidence, it didn't prove that Baroni fired the fatal shot,
Let's check out the other side.
which had come from a different weapon, a .22 caliber pistol. As police searched for that gun, they got a break. An inmate locked up with Baroni came forward.
I'm sick of this guy.
The inmate said Baroni had been bragging about the murder of Martha Bryant.
You know, the weapons he used.
Baroni told the inmate that he was the lone gunman.
You know, how he shot the woman.
He had used the 9mm to shoot up the victim's Volkswagen and then the .22 to deliver the fatal blow.
Guy's crazy. You know, like he's the baddest criminal.
And that wasn't all. Baroni had bragged that he and another man had committed yet another murder several months before that had remained unsolved. The details of that homicide also sounded familiar to investigators. Detective Scott Ryan reviewed the inmate's statements.
One of the cases that Mr. Baroni had described to the inmate was a case of a female who was picked up in Portland, transported out west, and raped and murdered. There was only one case that could be consistent with, and that was the death of Shanti Elise Woodman.
The investigations into 3 seemingly unrelated homicides were converging, exposing a trail of murder that led to one serial killer. Now, police needed to find hard evidence to make sure that Cesar Baroni would never be free to kill again. Having conclusively tied suspected serial killer Cesar Baroni to the unsolved murder of Margaret Schmidt, police in Hillsboro, Oregon now sought to link him to the murders of 41-year-old Martha Bryant and 23-year-old Shanti Woodman. Baroni's alleged accomplice in the Woodman murder was tracked down to a local jail where he was serving time on an unrelated charge.
Perhaps you might be able to tell me what your...
At first, Leonard Darcell was uncooperative. But after being confronted with the inmate's testimony, he decided to talk. Darcell told the detectives that he and Baroni had met Shanti Woodman in a Portland bar the night she was killed. They conned her into Baroni's car. Once inside, Baroni beat and raped her. Then, they drove her to a remote location. Darcell told police he begged Baroni to just leave her alive by the highway.
Get down, get out!
But Baroni shot her anyway, using a .22 caliber pistol.
But he laughed at that.
Though police were getting close to making their case, they needed to find the weapons used in the Martha Bryant and Shanti Woodman murders. In the course of interviews with Baroni's acquaintances, the police learned that he had scattered guns all over town, leaving many with ex-girlfriends. Police tracked down and collected several of these weapons, including a number of .22 caliber pistols. The weapons were forwarded to Chris Johnson at the Oregon State Police Crime Lab. Before the test firing, however, Johnson decided to first swab the barrel of one of the weapons that was consistent with the gun used to kill Martha Bryant.
We knew that the head wound to Martha Bryant was a contact near contact, and that with a gunshot wound you can get high velocity blood spatter. We swabbed the outside of the barrel and the inside of the barrel first before we test fired it to check for back spatter. We were able to find blood inside the barrel.
DNA testing showed the blood on the inside of the gun barrel was consistent with blood recovered at autopsy from murder victim Martha Bryant. This was the link needed to prove that Baroni's gun delivered the fatal head wound. Examiners at the crime lab were also able to conclusively tie another of Baroni's .22 caliber guns to the murder of Shanti Woodman. In all, Oregon authorities had linked serial killer Cesar Baroni to 3 unsolved murders.
Detail on the firing pin.
Oh, yeah.
18.
Detectives marched into the Washington County Jail and charged Cesar Baroni with the murders of Margaret Schmidt, Martha Bryant, and Shanti Woodman, and also with the assaults on the 2 elderly women. Based on the evidence, police believe that Baroni constantly prowled the area, searching for vulnerable women to abduct, molest, and kill. Though he targeted elderly women, anyone who crossed his path was a potential victim.
Not only had he gone after so many elderly people that should have had some type of peace in their later years, but he'd performed some very terrifying attacks on some people that were just totally unsuspecting as to what a predator he really was.
Cesar Baroni stood trial for the murders of Martha Bryant, Shanti Woodman, and Margaret Schmidt. In all 3 trials, he was sentenced to death. For his involvement in the Shanti Woodman kidnapping and murder, Leonard Darcell was sentenced to 20 years without the possibility of parole. Serial killer Cesar Baroni waited until his victims were alone before attacking. Other killers strike whenever the opportunity presents itself. Atascadero is known as a small, peaceful town nestled in the foothills of California's beautiful Central Coast. But a handgun will shatter the tranquility of any town, and Atascadero is no exception.
Shots fired, 8700 block.
In the early morning hours of February 5th, 1987, police and paramedics were dispatched to an apartment complex. There, they discovered the body of a young woman lying on the sidewalk. She had a single gunshot wound to the left temple. The emergency team also removed a nylon stocking that had been used to gag the victim. As crime techs fanned out to search the area for evidence, police began interviewing residents at the complex. They identified the woman as their neighbor, 22-year-old Lori Rainwater. They said that they had rushed outside after hearing screams followed by several gunshots. But because of the fog, they couldn't see anything clearly. They had no idea who could have done this. As the search for clues continued, police discovered another victim at the rear of the building. He was dead, the victim of a gunshot wound to the chest and an execution-style shot to the back of the head. He had also been gagged with a stocking. Neighbors later identified him as Lori's husband, 25-year-old John Rainwater. Police made their way to the couple's apartment. There, they discovered that the bedroom was on fire. This killer had gone to great lengths to obliterate any trace of himself from the crime scene. Police in Atascadero, California continued searching for clues in the double homicide of John and Lori Rainwater. After extinguishing a fire that had been deliberately set inside the couple's apartment, police began processing the scene. Blood spatter found throughout the apartment suggested a vicious attack. No fingerprints were discovered. Police did find evidence that the murdered couple had been bound. Yards of duct tape used to bind them were recovered. They also found 2 makeshift mittens made from socks wrapped with duct tape, probably used to keep the victims from loosening their bonds. As the search continued, police noticed 2 empty jars on a table. All of the items were collected and sent to the crime lab for a closer examination. At autopsy, the medical examiner determined that each of the victims had suffered deep, blunt force lacerations. There were also signs that they had been sexually assaulted. But it was a .38 caliber gunshot wound to the head that killed both John and Lori Rainwater. The recovered slugs were forwarded to the California Department of Criminal Justice Crime Lab. As examiners started processing the evidence, investigator Bill Hanley of the San Luis Obispo County DA's office began looking for leads. With no eyewitnesses to the double homicide, there were no immediate suspects to pursue.
The homicide occurred at approximately 6 a.m. It was a very foggy, dark morning, which hindered eyewitnesses' ability to see anything clearly.
With little evidence to go on, investigators turned to the victims' families for information. Mrs. Martinez, Lori Rainwater's mother, could not imagine anyone that would want the couple dead. She said that John and Lori were a happy and deeply religious couple. They worked several jobs, one of which included taking care of the apartment building for their landlords. They carefully budgeted their money. In fact, they had recently saved enough to move to a bigger apartment in order to raise a family. Mrs. Martinez said Lori had stored their savings in small glass jars. Investigators realized that those jars had been found empty. The information led investigators to theorize that robbery was the motive behind these savage murders. They hoped the evidence could tell them more. The duct tape and the empty jars believed to have contained the Rainwater savings were analyzed by latent print examiner Marty Collins. An inspection of the jars, however, revealed no signs of fingerprints. Next, Collins turned to the duct tape. But the tape was stuck together and crushed.
Once you get the tape that is stuck together, although there are ways to try and take it apart, the chance of getting latent prints is greatly diminished.
Traditional methods of locating and raising a print were unsuccessful. But Collins had one technique left to try: a dye staining process. After applying the chemical rhodamine 6G to the tape, a laser light was applied to the evidence. The dye adheres to any latent prints present on the tape. under the light, a small section of a fingerprint emerged. But the discovery was not that encouraging. Collins realized that this evidence could not be compared to prints already on file. The print from the tape was from high up on the tip of the finger, not on the pad of the finger where inked prints of suspects are taken. Over the next few months, police developed several suspects. They were all brought in for questioning, but eventually fingerprint analysis eliminated all of them. For Detective Hanley, it seemed that the investigation into the deaths of John and Lori Rainwater was at a standstill.
Due to the high publicity of the case, for approximately the next 2.5 months on a daily basis, up to 16, 17 hours a day, we ran down leads. These leads were from different parolees or offenders in the area to people calling up and saying that they believe that their neighbor did it, although having no really proof on it. All the leads that we had run into came up to be dead ends.
But then, on April 29, 1987, 2 months after the murders, police received a phone call from a woman who claimed to have information about the Rainwater homicides. She agreed to come in and answer questions. The informant said that she had met the Rainwaters a few days before they were murdered. While looking for an apartment, she and her boyfriend, Dennis Dwayne Webb, had spoken with them. The Rainwaters explained that they only collected rent money from the tenants for the landlord. They didn't actually rent out apartments. But while in the apartment, the informant noticed that her boyfriend was constantly glancing at the money jars on the kitchen counter. For investigators, the story hardly proved murder. But there was more. She went on to say that a week or so after meeting with the Rainwaters, she and Dennis Dwayne Webb were arrested in a drug raid. Police had collected drugs and several weapons, but failed to find a hidden .38 caliber pistol. Having followed the double murder investigation in the media, the informant knew that was the same type of gun used to kill John and Lori Rainwater. The informant was released on bail the following day. Shortly thereafter, Webb called her from jail. He wanted to talk about the hidden .38 caliber handgun.
She advised me that at Dennis Webb's insistence that she was to dismantle the gun, take it to the coastal area in California, and throw it off the cliff into the ocean.
The informant did as she was told. After taking the gun apart, she drove to a remote area along the coast and threw the gun over a 300-foot cliff. After months of having no solid leads, police now considered Dennis Dwayne Webb as the prime suspect in the murders of John and Lori Rainwater. But to make their case, they needed to locate the murder weapon. And after viewing the area, investigators were not optimistic.
Frankly, when I went there and noticed where she did throw it off, I thought there was little or no chance of ever recovering that weapon again.
Members of the search and rescue team from the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department were brought out to the site. After surveying the area, the team meticulously mapped out their mission. they double-checked all of their equipment to ensure their safety, and then geared up. It was now up to them to rappel down the perilous cliff and search the beach below for the weapon believed to have been used to kill John and Lori Rainwater. As investigators in Atascadero, California, continued searching for evidence in the slayings of John and Lori Rainwater, they finally got a break. An informant admitted that at the instruction of her boyfriend, Dennis Dwayne Webb, she had thrown the murder weapon off a 300-foot cliff into the Pacific Ocean. Though finding the weapon seemed like a long shot, the search and rescue team slowly made their way down the sheer cliff. Because of the treacherous conditions, it took the two-man team nearly 3 hours to reach the bottom. Once there, they began searching for the gun. For over an hour, the search turned up nothing. But then, under some rubbish, they found what appeared to be the frame of a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. Though it was badly damaged, police believed they had found the murder weapon. The team made their way back up the cliff and turned the gun over to investigator Hanley. For him, its value as evidence was questionable.
Looking down the barrel of this weapon, this was covered completely in rust. Frankly, I didn't think we were going to be able to get any type of ballistic help at all from this.
Police sent the gun to the California Department of Justice Crime Lab. Technicians managed to reassemble and clean the gun enough to test fire it. The test-fired bullets were then compared to those recovered from John and Lori Rainwater. The markings left on the bullets as they traveled down the barrel of the gun matched in some areas, but not all. Investigators were building a good case, but they were still a long way from proving murder. Police turned to their informant for help. They wanted to try and coax Webb into a confession. They asked his girlfriend to wear a wire and record conversations with him in prison. She agreed to cooperate, despite the danger of being exposed.
I'm convinced that the informant's motivation was only to see that justice was done. At no time during the investigation did the informant ask for any leniency on any pending criminal case she had, nor did she ask for any type of reward that was out there. It was only to see that justice was done.
During their conversations, Webb made no overt references to the murders. He believed that the correctional facility recorded all conversations. But when the informant told him she was worried that police suspected him in the murders, he began talking. But he spoke in code. Police were able to break it.
For instance, when he referred to the weapon that was recovered off the coastline. He referred to that as a cat. When he would talk about killing somebody, he would talk about popping grapes. It was that kind of code that we had to decipher.
Webb assured the informant not to worry. In addition to discarding the murder weapon, he said he had made certain that none of his prints had been left behind. Though Webb's statements were incriminating, they fell short of a confession. But they were enough for investigators to obtain a warrant to search Webb's car. Underneath the driver's seat, investigators found a roll of the same type of duct tape found in the Rainwater's apartment. In the trunk, they found a receipt for the tape, stamped with the date and time, February 4th, 1987, at 8:37 p.m. The purchase of the duct tape had been made just hours before the Rainwaters were murdered. Though convinced that Webb was the killer, police still needed to physically link him to the crime scene. Because the print on the duct tape found at the scene was from high up on the finger, examiners were unable to match it to any of Webb's fingerprints already on file. But investigators were able to obtain a court order to get new prints, this time from the area high up on Webb's fingertips. Marty Collins of the Department of Justice Crime Lab performed the analysis.
With the use of a 5-power magnifying glass, I compared the photograph that I had taken of the print on the tape with the inked fingerprints of Dennis Webb, and until I found the finger that was identified, and I found a sufficient number of ridge characteristics to make the identification.
The analysis proved that Dennis Dwayne Webb had bound the victims with the duct tape. The information was enough for investigators to charge him with 2 counts of capital murder.
Investigator Hanley.
Police theorized that after seeing the money in the Rainwater's apartment, Dennis Dwayne Webb began plotting to take it from them. A few days after that chance encounter, he returned to the couple's apartment and forced his way inside. Not only did he steal their savings, he also terrorized and tortured them for hours. When the couple managed to somehow escape, Webb chased them down and murdered them in cold blood. He then set the place on fire, hoping to destroy any evidence he may have left behind. On June 20th, 1988, Dennis Dwayne Webb was convicted of burglary, robbery, and 2 counts of murder with special circumstances. During the penalty phase of the trial, Webb testified, and for the first time admitted his responsibility for the deaths of John and Lori Rainwater. After hearing his admission of guilt, the jury sentenced Dennis Dwayne Webb to death. Stranger-on-stranger homicides are among the hardest to solve. But fortunately for investigators, killers always leave clues behind. They rely on forensic experts in the lab to help them solve the crimes and bring about justice when killers take deadly aim. On Maryland's eastern shore, a couple's romantic weekend getaway turns lethal when a man dies in a deadly blaze. Though all of the evidence suggests a tragic accident, a routine investigation exposes some troubling irregularities. In Florida, an apparently healthy woman dies in her home, and examiners can find nothing to explain the death. Though police suspect murder, years will pass before new forensic technology offers any hope of proving it. When an untraceable poison is used to commit murder, homicide detectives face a difficult challenge. For help, they turn to forensic toxicologists to follow a killer's tracks and expose a toxic death. St. Michael's is an historic fishing village turned resort on Maryland's eastern shore. Quaint tree-lined streets and old homes and boutiques have made it a popular weekend getaway.
Talbot County 911.
In the early morning hours of February 15th, 1998, an emergency dispatcher received a frantic call from a clerk at a local resort.
Is there anybody in the room?
One of the rooms was on fire, and he believed a guest was trapped inside.
East and I-36, respond to St. Michael's Resort. Fire. At least one subject in the room.
Within minutes, rescue workers from the Talbot County Fire Department and officers from the Maryland State Police arrived at the location. The blaze, confined to a single room, was quickly brought under control. Though the hotel clerks had managed to pull the guest from the room, the victim, 35-year-old Stephen Rico, was pronounced dead at the scene. His face had been burned beyond recognition. Police learned that shortly before 1:30 a.m., the victim's wife rushed into the hotel lobby to report that her room was on fire. The clerks called 911 and then rushed to the room. They found the victim lying in bed and quickly pulled him out. But it was too late. The victim's wife, 33-year-old Kim Rico, said she and her husband Steve were spending Valentine's weekend together.
Give me a little bit here.
Earlier that evening, she and Steve had dinner with friends at the hotel's dinner theater.
Make sure your wife is okay. Have a little
Kim said Steve had been drinking heavily and had taken antidepressants and cold medication.
Oh, well, why don't we have a toast to you, honey?
Kim said that Steve became sloppy drunk.
Cheers to mine.
It's so bad.
She and her husband returned to their room a few hours later. Steve continued to drink. Then he began pressuring her for sex.
You're drunk, and I'm not interested. No, I'm just not interested.
When Kim refused, he became angry.
Hey, no, I'm not.
To avoid a fight, she grabbed her things and left to go for a drive. When she returned a few hours later, she made her way into the room and was immediately overcome by smoke. She couldn't believe her husband of 10 years was gone.
He's a smoker? What kind of cigars does he smoke?
Investigators searched for answers to explain the deadly blaze. Maryland Deputy State Fire Marshal Mike Mulligan began by looking for the fire's origin.
The point of origin is key in determining the cause of a fire and determining whether it was accidental or purposely set. And what you do is you begin at the area of least fire damage and you progress into the most fire damage. And the idea is that at the spot where you have the most fire damage, the fire has been burning the longest.
On the nightstand next to the bed, investigators found their first clue, partially melted soft drink bottle.
The heat softened the plastic on the side that faced the fire while it was still cold on the other side, and the plastic began to melt and pointed the neck of the bottle toward the point of origin.
The fire had apparently started near the pillow, where Stephen Rico's head would have been. Burn patterns showed its progress across the bed and down to the charred carpet. Then, investigators uncovered a possible cause of the fire. On the bedside table, they found an open package of cigars. One was missing. For fire marshals, the reason behind the blaze seemed tragically clear.
We could eliminate the electrical, we could eliminate the heating and the air conditioning units, we could eliminate the wood-burning stove, and what did that leave us with? Well, one of the possibilities was careless smoking.
At autopsy, the medical examiner found that Stephen Rico had suffered severe burns to his head, arms, and torso. But surprisingly, no traces of soot or carbon monoxide were found in the victim's lungs. That suggested he had stopped breathing before the room had filled with smoke. Having found no cause of death, blood and tissue samples were collected for further analysis. Toxicologists at the Maryland State Police Crime Lab confirmed that there was no carbon monoxide present in the victim's blood or tissue. And blood alcohol test results were 0.00%. Examiners found no evidence suggesting that Steve had been drinking or taking pills, as his wife claimed. The results were passed on to the Maryland State Police. Homicide Detective Joe Gamble struggled to reconcile all the facts of the case.
They could not determine how he died. They could tell us that he didn't die of any natural causes. There was no alcohol in Stephen's blood, no soot or carbon monoxide in his lungs. That did not jive with what Kimberly Rico told us that night.
To resolve the inconsistencies, detectives questioned the victim's wife again. Kim Rico was surprised by the lab findings. In addition to drinking heavily at dinner, Steve had purchased beer and cigars earlier that day. She admitted her marriage had been rocky, but claimed she and Steve had managed to work out their problems. Everything had been going so well. As the questioning continued, Kim grew nervous. Then she asked for an attorney and ended the interview. To find out what Kim Rico was hiding, police contacted the couple's friends. All agreed that Kim and Steve had been working hard to salvage their marriage. But none of the friends had ever known Steve to smoke cigars. The inconsistent information, in addition to the autopsy findings, led investigators to suspect that Steve Rico's death had not resulted from an accident, as his wife suggested. To prove it, they would first need to determine exactly how the fire started. They turned to arson investigators at the Maryland State Fire Marshal's office. At a training facility in eastern Maryland, fire marshals looked to recreate the damage observed at the scene. They lit the same brand of cigar found inside the room and placed it on a pillow they'd obtained from the hotel. It smoldered, then went out. The ash from the lit cigar failed to ignite the flame-retardant pillow.
We took the cigars and placed them on the pillows. Did this repeatedly for approximately an hour and a half. And what the test showed us was that careless smoking could not have been the cause of ignition caused by the pillow.
Though investigators now suspected an accelerant had been used to start the blaze, lab tests failed to expose any traces of a flammable substance.
Hard to get going.
However, the accelerant might have burned away during the fire. The only other way investigators could ignite the pillow and recreate the burn damage was by applying a makeshift torch directly to it.
The test confirmed that the fire was incendiary in nature, that it was not an accidental fire. It was not a cause of careless smoking.
The fire had been intentionally set. The findings were passed on to police. Soon after, Stephen Rico's death was officially classified as a homicide. Authorities on Maryland's eastern shore proved that a hotel room fire that claimed the life of 35-year-old Steve Rico was not the result of careless smoking, as his wife Kim suggested. Having found no traces of smoke in the victim's lungs, it was also clear that Steve Rico was already dead when the fire was set. But the medical examiner was unable to determine exactly how he died. All of the findings led police to believe that Kim Rico had murdered her husband. Now they looked for physical evidence to prove it. Police tracked down her co-workers at a Washington, D.C. hospital, where she was employed as a surgical technician.
Did she ever bring up her husband?
No one believed Kim was capable of murder.
Yeah, she did a couple of times, as a matter of fact.
However, one doctor did recall an unusual conversation he had with her a month earlier.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Kim had been complaining about her marriage and jokingly offered him $50,000 to kill her husband.
What are you talking about?
Not taking her seriously, he joked back, telling her she could put Stephen to sleep forever by injecting him with a drug called succinylcholine.
Now, what would that do to someone?
Kim's co-worker described the drug as a powerful muscle relaxant used to prevent involuntary movement during surgery.
1900.
As a surgical technician, Kim used it nearly every day. Homicide detective Joe Gamble.
Kimberly Rico's profession was significant working as a surgical technician, in that she had access to certain drugs that other people in the hospital and that normal citizens don't have access to. One of those drugs, is we learned, was succinylcholine.
Though toxicology tests turned up no traces of the drug in Stephen Rico's body, detectives learned that succinylcholine breaks down almost immediately, leaving no detectable traces behind. In essence, the drug is a perfect murder weapon.
It's injected into the tissue, doesn't have to go into the bloodstream, and it causes your muscles to relax, which includes your heart and your diaphragm and your breathing. And with enough succinylcholine, you just stop breathing and your heart stops and you die.
With the homicide investigation taking on a clearer focus, detectives returned to the crime scene. While they searched the hotel for a syringe or a drug vial, divers combed the Miles River, located directly behind the resort. They spent hours combing the bottom of the river and the surrounding area. But their search turned up nothing. A few days later, however, a hotel employee found something lying in the grass. It was a discarded syringe. the evidence was forwarded to the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. A thorough analysis of the needle failed to produce any traces of the victim's blood or succinylcholine. Examiners applied a laser light to the evidence, hoping to find fingerprints that may have been left behind. But all of their efforts turned up nothing. With no obvious motive or a murder weapon, investigators would have to rely on the circumstantial evidence to prove that Kim Rico had killed her husband. And their best hope was to establish that she had staged the crime scene to throw investigators off her trail.
So we set out, of course, to find out where the alcohol came from and where the cigars came from, hopefully proving that Kimberly bought these things or purchased these things to stage the room, to set the room up. I wonder if I could take a couple minutes of your time, checking to see if
Detective Gamble canvassed convenience stores near the resort. He found a clerk who recalled a woman matching Kim Rico's description. The store employee told him that around the time of the murder, the woman came in to purchase a six-pack of beer and a pack of cigars. The customer had made a lasting impression on the clerk.
Who dyes your hair?
The store clerk remembered Kimberly that day because Kimberly was particularly rude. Kimberly had been so abrupt with her, and that stood out in the store clerk's mind. That's how she was able to remember her.
Police collected a package of cigars like the ones purchased by Kim Rico.
Price tag on that.
They were the same brand found in the Rico's hotel room. Investigators also collected the stamp gun used to attach the price stickers to the merchandise.
Mark everything in the store with? Thanks for your time.
The items were delivered to forensic document examiner Joan DiMartino at the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. To establish a link between the evidence, she began comparing the characteristics of the price sticker on the cigar pack found at the crime scene to the one collected from the convenience store.
The characteristic of most significance would be the design cuts, the tamper-proof die cuts that cause something to break away if say, a ne'er-do-well person wanted to peel off the price tag, it would break away. These are common to a particular manufacturer.
A visual inspection revealed no differences between all of the stickers collected. Using an infrared light source, DiMartino looked for commonalities and differences within the ink itself. She found that the dyes and pigments that make each ink unique were the same on both cigar packs. They had all originated from the same stamp gun collected from the convenience store. Kim Rico had purchased the cigars found at the crime scene, something she had previously denied. Police were building a strong circumstantial case against Kim Rico. But having revealed no official cause of death and no obvious motive behind the homicide, investigators were still a long way from proving murder. Maryland police were convinced that 33-year-old surgical technician Kim Rico had murdered her husband with an untraceable drug, then staged the scene to make his death appear as a tragic accident. But so far, all of the evidence amassed against her was circumstantial. Looking to uncover a motive, police re-interviewed people close to the couple.
Talk to you about Kimberly. I understand that you're friends with her?
One friend admitted that just before Stephen's death, Kim said that she wanted to divorce him. Kim had been having an affair with a man she'd met a few months before. They'd been spending a lot of time together. And Kim was no longer interested in salvaging her marriage to Steve. But Kim was dreading a prolonged and costly divorce. The information was enough for investigators to obtain a warrant to search Kim's home. There, in a desk drawer, they found 2 life insurance policies, taken out on Stephen Rico. Kim stood to gain $200,000 from her husband's death. It was the break homicide detectives had been looking for.
We felt that Kimberly had motive. She had a large amount of money to gain. She had been involved in an affair that she wanted to move forward with. And those were the 2 things that we felt that Kimberly wanted to gain by the murder of Stephen Rico. We got out of Kim Rico's house on Bellamy.
A warrant was issued for Kim Rico's arrest. But before police could act, they received some startling information.
Where's she at?
Kim Rico had attempted suicide.
How long ago was that? Okay.
One of Kim's friends had become concerned when she hadn't heard from her in some time. When she went to check on her, she found Kim unconscious on the floor. An empty bottle of pills lay nearby. Kim Rico, the prime suspect in her husband's death, was rushed to a nearby hospital. Though she was in critical condition, medical personnel had gotten to her on time. A few days later, Kim Rico was released from the hospital. Police were there waiting.
Are you Kimberly Rico? Yes. Okay, right now I have a warrant for your arrest.
She was taken into custody and charged with murder.
You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to return to your kinfolk.
Based on the evidence, investigators believe that Kimberly Rico was driven by greed and a desire to further her affair. On February 15, 1998, she injected her unsuspecting husband with the untraceable drug succinylcholine. It paralyzed him immediately. She staged the scene to make it appear Stephen had been drinking beer and smoking cigars. Then she set the room on fire. Kimberly Rico was convicted of arson and first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. In Maryland, the circumstantial evidence alone was enough to convict Kim Rico of killing her husband. But in Florida, investigators would need irrefutable scientific proof in order to win a murder conviction. Situated in Bay County, on Florida's coastal panhandle, lies the affluent and peaceful community of Panama Beach. There, around 9 a.m. on the morning of May 30th, 1991, 18-year-old Jennifer Cybers went into her parents' bedroom to wake up her mother, Kay. But Kay wasn't responding. Panicked, Jennifer called her father, Florida State Medical Examiner. He told her not to worry. He was sending help and said he would be there shortly.
Okay.
Emergency workers and a doctor from the medical examiner's office were dispatched to the scene. Kay was unresponsive and showed no signs of life. The 52-year-old mother of 3 was pronounced dead at the scene, the apparent victim of a heart attack. A Bay County Sheriff's deputy heard the call over the radio and responded to the house.
I'd like to speak to you outside.
He was informed that the death had resulted from natural causes and he wasn't needed.
I'd like to speak to you outside if I could.
A short while later, the victim's husband, medical examiner Dr. William Cybers, arrived at the house. He learned that his wife of more than 20 years was gone.
Any idea what caused it? Jimmy should be in the room, but I need to get to her. Make sure
Dr. Cybers asked that her body be taken directly to the funeral home. The following day, agents from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement received a call. An anonymous informant was troubled by several irregularities surrounding Kay's death and the actions of her husband. After hearing all of the details, Special Agent Scotty Sanderson agreed to take a closer look at Dr. Cybers.
Certain red flags came up. He was a medical examiner. No autopsy had been performed. Kay Cybers was in apparent good health. He did not call 911 after learning of her distress, and the police were notified and sent to the home, but were asked to leave by staff of Dr. Cybers.
As a medical examiner, Dr. Cybers knows that all unattended deaths require that an autopsy be performed. His wife's was no exception. To find out why he hadn't followed protocol, investigators arranged for an interview.
It's important that an autopsy be conducted. Could you tell me why you didn't order an autopsy?
Dr. Cybers admitted he had made a mistake.
And I just
He was distraught and wasn't thinking clearly.
no better family.
He loved Kay very much,
And heart disease. I tried to convince her.
and her death was completely unexpected.
Few drinks, enjoyed ourselves. Very pleasant.
The night
evening.
before she died, the two had gone out for a nice dinner.
Later on, she felt that she had a little.
I've got a really bad chest pain.
But around 4 a.m., she woke him up.
I can hardly breathe. It hurts when I breathe.
Kay was experiencing pain in her chest and left shoulder.
Oh, man.
Draw some blood for her.
Dr. Cybers was concerned. Kay had a family history of heart disease and diabetes,
Just try to relax.
but she refused to go to the hospital.
Let me see if I can put your arm down a minute.
Dr. Cybers said he tried to draw some blood so he could have it tested the following morning.
Ouch.
But he said he botched the job.
Ow. Ow, Bill.
After 2 unsuccessful attempts, he gave up.
I'll be right back. Lay back.
Eventually, Kay fell back asleep.
She was fine.
Dr. Cybers said he called to check up on her several times the following morning, but he never got through.
See if she wanted to take something for it.
As a matter of routine, Agent Sanderson asked for the syringe,
Explain to me what happened.
but Dr. Cybers didn't have it.
Where's it?
He said that on his way to work the following morning, he tossed the needle in the trash and then disposed of the garbage in a dumpster a few blocks away.
Trash to the dumpster.
Yes.
Is that typically what your family does with the household garbage?
Most of our garbage, yes.
Dr. Cybers, is there...
All of the information, including the manner in which the needle was disposed, troubled Agent Sanderson.
He's a physician. He has a needle on a syringe exposed in a household garbage, throwing it in the garbage bin supposedly down the street. All of these different factors were alarming me and the other agents that were with me about what we were going to be working.
Troubled by all of the irregularities, investigators began looking deeper into Kay Cybers' medical history. FDLE Special Agent Dennis Norred pored over her records, looking for any clue that might help explain her death. He found no records suggesting she suffered from diabetes or heart disease, as her husband claimed.
We had gathered documents from the time that Kay was born up until the time that she had died in Panama City. And there was nothing to ever indicate that she would have experienced any type of health problems.
The information suggested that Dr. Cybers was not being truthful about his wife's medical history. To find out why, investigators needed to examine the victim's body. After obtaining a warrant, authorities were dispatched to the funeral home to retrieve Kay's remains. They arrived just in time.
Agents were dispatched to that funeral home where they found she had been embalmed and was in a casket for showing, and they were about to transport her body back to her home in Iowa.
Dr. Cybers, it seemed, was in a hurry to bury his wife. Kay Cybers' body was transported to an independent medical examiner's office located in Pensacola. It was now up to them to determine if her death had resulted from natural causes or something else. Authorities in Bay County, Florida, looked to explain the death of Kay Cybers, a seemingly healthy 52-year-old mother of 3 found dead in her home. Though her husband, medical examiner Dr. William Cybers, claimed she had a history of heart disease and diabetes, her medical records told a different story. Investigators hoped an autopsy would give them answers. Medical examiner Dr. Gary Cumberland looked to pinpoint a specific cause of death. An external examination revealed the presence of 2 distinct puncture marks on the victim's right arm. That was consistent with Dr. Cybers' claim that he tried to draw blood from her shortly before her death. But the marks were also consistent with something being injected into the body.
I've seen some fresh image around these, so I think that they occurred before she died. So let's make sure that we get some of that tissue for toxicology as well as general histology.
Dr. Cumberland focused his internal examination on the victim's heart. There was no evidence of disease or any signs of damage. In fact, all of the victim's organs seemed healthy. Dr. Cumberland found nothing to explain why Kay Cybers had died so suddenly. Troubled by the findings, he collected tissue and blood samples for further analysis.
Basically, what we have is a person who died with no natural disease process responsible for her death. And in those instances, we start looking for toxicologic agents, i.e., is there some drug or poison that she had been given that resulted in her death?
The samples were forwarded to the Dade County Medical Examiner's office. But toxicologists were at a disadvantage. Kay Cybers' body had been embalmed soon after her death, and those fluids had likely destroyed any traces of drugs or poisons that may have been injected into her system. Test results turned up negative. The findings did little to ease investigators' suspicions that Kay Cybers had met with foul play.
And we have agents that will be accompanying this material down to my...
Despite the lack of hard evidence, they refused to close the case. Though the victim's husband explained the puncture marks on Kay's arms had resulted from an attempt to draw blood, investigators formulated a different theory. They speculated he had injected her with a lethal drug. But a search of dumpsters near the couple's house failed to produce a syringe or any evidence that could prove it. Investigators turned to the couple's children, hopeful they could shed light on a possible motive for murder. But the Cybers' daughter insisted that her parents' relationship was strong.
She seemed normal, seemed fine.
Her father was dedicated to Kay and the children. The daughter said she had last seen her mother the night before she died.
Yeah. Wonderful. We went to that new restaurant with Mama's.
When her parents returned home from dinner, they seemed happy and both were in good moods.
Okay. Good night, Daddy. I'll be up in a little bit.
She and her mother stayed up and talked for some time.
It was good. It was really good. School was long. Oh.
You know anything about her medical history?
None of the children believed that their father had anything to do with their mother's death.
Appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
The investigation was going nowhere.
This is going to be...
Dearly beloved, we do thank you for coming today. Our thoughts
Authorities had no choice but to release the victim's body to her family.
every one of you here with us today.
Kay Cyber's remains were flown to her hometown in Iowa. There, she was laid to rest. But agents refused to give up. They scoured through the case files, looking for anything they may have overlooked. In his statements to police, Dr. Cybers claimed he had tried to telephone his wife numerous times on the morning of her death to check on her. Investigators subpoenaed his cell phone records and found he was telling the truth. But FDLE agent Dennis Norrid noticed something else.
Numbers that were called. Over about a 3-month time period, there were approximately 140 some odd calls made from Dr. Cybers to a particular phone number.
2 of those calls took place on the morning of Kay's death. The number was traced to a former lab technician who worked with Dr. Cybers.
I believe you're acquainted with Miss Cybers.
The woman admitted that the 2 were close friends.
At the hospital, I cared for him.
He had called her the day of Kay's death, but she said he was grief-stricken and just wanted to be consoled.
We weren't romantically involved.
But investigators sensed she wasn't telling them everything.
Yes, I do.
Under persistent questioning, she admitted she and Dr. Cybers were romantically involved.
So how's work taking?
Initially, she considered him a father figure.
A little bit busy.
Same here.
But as they began spending more time together, her feelings for him deepened. And soon, they fell in love.
Same thing that I felt when we glanced at each other's eyes.
How do you relate to him?
No.
She didn't believe he was capable of murder. Investigators disagreed.
And is he your immediate...
Dr. Cybers wasn't the dedicated husband and father he portrayed himself to be. They theorized he had murdered his wife in order to clear the way to pursue his affair. Police forwarded Kay Cybers' tissue samples collected at autopsy to the National Medical Services Lab in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, one of the most advanced forensic labs in the country. There, renowned toxicologist Dr. Frederick Reeders agreed to look into the case.
Cybers case, medium and calcium.
And after reviewing Kay Cybers' autopsy report, he found a potential clue. An elevated level of potassium had been detected in her eye fluid. Though potassium occurs naturally in the body in small amounts, if a large dose is injected into a person's bloodstream, it will cause the heart to stop immediately. In the normal human body, potassium and iron are found in equal amounts within red blood cells. To find out if Kay Cybers had an unnatural amount of potassium in her body, toxicologists used a newly developed system that measures the ratio of potassium to iron. The procedure was successful. Dr. Reeders reviewed the findings.
The ratio of potassium to iron in critical areas were much higher than normal. which led me to the conclusion that potassium had been administered to this person, and that was potentially a cause of death for it.
The findings had provided powerful evidence that Kay Cybers had not died of natural causes. But to confirm the results, examiners needed additional samples from the victim's body. For investigators, that presented a problem. In the state of Iowa, where Kay Cybers was buried, state law will only allow a body to be exhumed if the family gives its consent. Dr. Cybers, who insisted he had nothing to hide, refused to give his permission. Desperate not to let their case slip away, authorities turned to Florida State's Attorney Harry Shorstein for help. He agreed to prosecute the case.
Thank you.
But almost immediately, he faced a crushing setback. The only scientific evidence that could prove murder had been challenged by defense experts. Because potassium occurs naturally in the body, the judge ruled that without additional samples, there was insufficient evidence to prove that Kay Cybers had been administered a lethal dosage.
Very simply stated, when you die, your red blood cells almost immediately break down. They're full of potassium, and as a result, the potassium within your body goes everywhere. And the general thought among the scientific community is that if you're injected with potassium, unless you could get to the body almost immediately, you couldn't distinguish between the potassium that had been injected in the body and the potassium that is within your body naturally.
Despite the court's conclusions, everything authorities had learned convinced them Dr. Cybers had murdered his wife. But until they could find irrefutable evidence, they would be unable to prove it. Several years had gone by since the 1991 death of 52-year-old Kay Cybers. Though toxicology tests convinced Florida authorities that her husband had injected her with a lethal dose of potassium, the court ruled the findings were inadmissible. Still, Special Prosecutor Harry Shorstein didn't believe that Kay Cybers died of heart disease, as her husband, medical examiner William Cybers, had suggested.
The examination of the heart that had taken place at the autopsy showed no indication whatsoever of any heart disease, and we were going to proceed with the trial without an actual cause of death, just based on the circumstantial evidence.
In February of 1997, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Dr. William Cybers. He had since retired and married the woman he had been having an affair with. He voluntarily turned himself in to police. Because of health problems, he was released on $300,000 bail, but not before being fitted with an electronic monitoring device. He was only allowed to leave his home to visit attorneys and to attend church. With the trial approaching, prosecutors struggled to prepare their case for a jury. Then, they received some unexpected news. In the years since Kay Cybers' death, toxicologists at the National Medical Services Lab in Willow Groves, Pennsylvania, had developed new forensic tests that could detect previously untraceable poisons. Though the samples collected at autopsy were several years old, according to Dr. Kevin Ballard, they had been well preserved.
The tissues from Ms. Cybers were taken from her at the time of her original autopsy, but she had already been embalmed. Those tissues, those organs, were maintained frozen during all the years between the time of her death and the time of our analyses.
First, Dr. Ballard wanted to test the samples for the presence of paralyzing drugs. These drugs are known to increase potassium levels in the body. which might explain why high levels of potassium were found in Kay's tissue samples years earlier. He subjected the samples to a process called QTOF, which stands for quadrupole time of flight. Essentially, the process acts as a molecular microscope. First, all of the molecules that are present in the sample are separated. Each individual molecule is then broken down into pieces. Using sophisticated detection equipment, the individual pieces are then weighed. The molecular weight of the samples is then compared to the molecular weight of known paralyzing drugs. In tissue samples taken from Kay Cyber's kidney, the analysis revealed lethal amounts of the drug succinylcholine.
Succinylcholine and these other paralyzing drugs, when they're administered to a person, they paralyze the skeletal muscles of our bodies. These are the muscles that move our limbs. They also paralyze the specialized skeletal muscle, which is the diaphragm, which is the primary muscle that we use when we breathe. So part of the effect is to stop a person's breathing.
Done the preliminary interviews of the family members.
The analysis had finally given investigators the evidence they needed to prove murder. As a physician, the victim's husband had easy access to the drug and the knowledge to use it with deadly effect. Driven by the desire to further his affair and to avoid a costly divorce, police believe that on May 30th, 1991, Dr. William Cybers injected his wife with a lethal amount of the paralyzing drug. He then tried to use his position as chief medical examiner to conceal his crime.
State of Florida versus William
In January 2000, Dr. William Cybers was convicted of the murder of his wife, Kay.
So we all done at Pensacola, Escambia County, Florida.
He was sentenced to life in prison.
Date 3/23/2001.
Some killers believe that by using an untraceable drug, their crimes will go unpunished. But with each advance in forensic science, there are fewer poisons that can escape detection. And that means a better chance for investigators to solve those once elusive cases of toxic death. In New Mexico, a university co-ed is missing. Police must piece together a web of evidence to catch those responsible if they ever hope to find her alive. In Virginia, a killer uses the interstate as his personal dumping ground. A woman's body is found, and investigators have little time and few clues to lead them to a killer who could strike again. Perpetrators try to conceal their crimes, yet savvy investigators can take the most obscure data and recreate a murder. Though killers treacherously lure their victims by gaining their confidence, forensic science brings to light crimes committed and the betrayal of a blind trust. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. The town of Las Cruces, New Mexico sits on the Rio Grande, just north of Mexico. A vast desert surrounds the town, the perfect place to conceal a crime. In January 1998, 911 dispatch received a call about a missing student named Carly Martinez. The 18-year-old freshman was beginning her second semester. When campus police arrived at the dorm, her roommate and parents were waiting.
Are you guys here about Carly?
They said it was unlike Carly to be out of touch.
Our daughter's been missing.
Her father told police they hadn't seen Carly since the day before. He and his wife had taken both girls to dinner and then dropped them off at their dorm room about 6:30 p.m.
Welcome. I needed it.
No one had seen or heard from Carly since. University police began a missing persons investigation. Her parents and roommate gave police a description and photograph of Carly. An extremely attractive girl with long dark hair and dark eyes. She was 5'6" and was last seen wearing jeans and a brown jacket. Desperate to find her, they posted flyers around the campus, hoping someone would recognize Carly and contact police. A massive search effort began. Officers and volunteers on horseback combed the surrounding desert area. Police gave dogs a piece of her clothing, hoping the scent would lead them to her. And investigators knew time was running out. If Carly were lost or wandering in the desert, she would not survive for very long. 4 days passed before they got the first break in the case. A fellow student, Samuel Sanchez, saw the missing person posters and contacted police. He said he saw Carly with Jesse Avalos, one of his co-workers at an off-campus bookstore. According to Sanchez, he saw them at a local roller rink on the night she disappeared. Jesse and Carly were skating together and holding hands. Sanchez told police the couple was later joined by Jason Desnoyers, one of Jesse's friends. They looked as if they were having a good time. The Las Cruces Police Department was called in to assist the university in the investigation. David Cortez was the lead detective.
The co-worker said that they closed the roller rink early that evening of the 14th and that he saw the three of them leaving together.
Campus police were the first to speak with Jesse Avalos.
Hello, how you doing?
They hoped he
Jesse
could
Avalos?
provide some answers.
How you doing? I'm Officer Costa with University Police, and I just wanted to ask you about your whereabouts and if you were hanging out with Carly Martinez the other night. Yeah. Can you tell me what
Avalos
happened?
said he was with Carly on a date and that his friend Jason Desnoyers had joined them.
You know, we went out.
After skating, they had a few beers at a local bar.
He just asked to be dropped
He
off.
told police Carly asked to be dropped off at a gas station near campus to use a payphone. He said he hadn't seen Carly since. Detective Cortez found the story odd. He questioned why Carly would use the payphone at the gas station and not at her dorm. The detective now wanted to speak with Jesse's friend, Jason Desnoyers. Maybe he could provide more information.
You're all ready. You're taking, right?
Jason's story started out much like his friend's. He said Jesse Avalos was out on a date with Carly, and he met up with them at the skating rink.
Me and Jesse and his girl.
But then Jason's story changed.
Decided to go out and have a couple drinks.
He said they did not drop her off at a gas station. He said they took her back to school.
So we drove her over to her dorm and dropped her off.
And where'd you guys drop her off at?
Detective Cortez grew suspicious. He knew one or both of the boys was lying.
Campus, as far as your story goes, is where because of the conflicting stories, we felt that something wasn't right.
Detective Cortez asked for permission to search Jason Desnoyers' truck, hoping to uncover something that would bring them closer to finding Carly. Police noticed some scratches on the car's exterior, on both the driver's and the passenger's side. They extended the entire length of the car. Other than that, the car appeared to be spotless.
We noticed that the inside of the truck was very clean, as if it had been recently washed.
Several fibers were collected from the floor and seat. Using the chemical luminol, they checked for blood and other bodily fluids. If there were any present, they would glow under the light.
Upon performing the luminol test, we discovered that the center bench seat area was lighting up. This caught our attention, along with the scratches, some indicators to us that something just wasn't right.
When investigators examined the seat more closely, they discovered a large reddish-brown stain. A portion of the seat cushion was cut out and sent to the forensic lab for testing. At the New Mexico State Crime Lab, forensic scientist Mark Salvo tested the truck seat for human blood.
They had removed the foam cushion of the seat, and on there you could see obvious staining on that. Did presumptive examination for the presence of blood on the material side, which was, you couldn't see anything, and got positives on that, as well as on the foam where you could see a stain and got a positive indication that there might be blood present on those items.
The seat cushion tested positive for human blood, but the recent cleaning of the seat had destroyed any DNA. As the police gathered evidence, the search for the young girl continued. Carly's disappearance was reported throughout the southwestern states.
By short notice here.
Authorities hoped the media coverage would prompt someone with information to come forward.
We just received, we got an updated photo on our victim, Carly. Just got this morning from the family. And as the days followed, we had leads coming in, hundreds of leads. They were distributed to the task force and followed up on. January 14th.
Investigators spoke to an informant who had recently been arrested on a parole violation. He was a neighbor of Jesse Avalos and claimed to have information regarding a jacket Jesse wore the night Carly disappeared.
Well, you're gonna find out why you're here.
The man said that Jason Desnoyers approached him several days after Carly went missing and asked for a favor.
This subject told us that he took the jacket from Jason and hid it under some rolled up carpet just outside the apartment.
Police searched behind the apartment building where the witness said the jacket was located.
There's some carpet right over here.
They found a roll of carpet where he said it would be.
Let me unravel it.
Inside was a military-style jacket.
Yeah.
It appeared to be stained with blood.
More stains on here.
The jacket was bagged and sent to the lab for further examination. After police obtained a warrant, they also searched inside Jesse Avalos' apartment.
Why don't you take the living room?
A team of forensic experts arrived and scoured each room. In the bathroom, investigators noticed reddish-colored stains they believed were blood. The shower curtain was collected for testing. In Jesse's bed, investigators found one long, dark hair. Some of Avalos' clothing was also bagged and sent to the lab. If the smudges found on the jacket and shower curtain were blood, forensic scientists would need to compare it to Carly's. Detective Cortez asked her family for personal items that might provide them with a DNA sample. Investigators were piecing together a case. They knew the longer it took, the hopes of ever finding the girl alive grew slim. They hoped the evidence would be the break they needed to lead them to the missing student. For 5 days, investigators in New Mexico searched for missing college student Carly Martinez. So far, the search yielded nothing. The 2 men last seen with the young woman claimed they went roller skating, had a few beers, and dropped her off.
No, we picked her up at the door.
But investigators didn't believe their story. Bloodstains found in the truck and on the shower curtain inside one of the suspect's apartments cast even more doubt.
Come on in here, you guys.
The police secured a warrant to collect DNA samples from Jason Desnoyers and Jesse Avalos.
So Jason here just need some body standards.
Desnoyers appeared with his lawyer. A technician took hair, blood, and saliva samples. Detective David Cortez supervised the procedure. He looked for any signs that indicated Desnoyers had been in a struggle.
One of the things I did notice at the time was that he had a large cut on his right hand, which was in the healing process. It was scabbing over, but it was, you can tell that it was very recent.
It's not in the search warrant, no.
But just one
But
photo.
Desnoyers' lawyer refused to let police take photos of the cut.
We don't need a photo.
Body standards were also collected from Jesse Avalos. All of the samples were sent to the state crime lab to be compared to bloodstains found on both the jacket and shower curtain. Forensic scientist Mark Salvo conducted the examinations. First, Salvo extracted DNA from Carly's personal items to compare with samples found on the jacket. Then, he applied a chemical solution to the stains on Desnoyers' jacket.
Looks like there's some discoloration up here in this area. I'm going to do a presumptive test on it. In the presence of blood, I have a colorless solution. It's going to turn into a dark pinkish color if blood is present.
The jacket tested positive for human blood. Salvo also swabbed the shower curtain found in Jesse's apartment. Using the same method, he learned there was blood on both sides of the shower curtain. These were collected and marked for evidence. Salvo then compared the blood found on the jacket and the shower curtain and was startled by the findings. The blood on these items came from 3 separate individuals. He discovered that the DNA matched not only both suspects, but also the victim.
I think it's just unusual in a case like that where you can link 3 individuals to a piece of evidence. So I can show that either all 3 of these individuals were injured and bleeding and left their material on this item, or that some of the individuals carried away DNA and left it on that item.
Police still didn't know if Carly was dead or alive. And they believed the only people who did know were their 2 suspects. Since Jason Desnoyers had cooperated in the beginning, Detective Cortez hoped he would talk now.
When we attempted to contact Jason Desnoyers, I learned through his attorney as well as his family that his whereabouts were unknown. So we moved over to Jesse Avalos. City Police, Jesse.
Cortez hoped with one suspect on the run, he'd get the other
Jesse, how
to
you
talk.
doing?
All right, how are you?
Not wanting to tip his hand, the detective played it cool and just asked Jesse for his help in the case.
Here by yourself?
Yes.
And we explained to him that we wanted to talk about Carly and if he would help us out, give us any information that he had or that he knew. One of the things we explained to Jesse was how the family was feeling, not knowing the whereabouts of their daughter.
It looked like his tactic was beginning to pay off.
With that, Jesse, out of the blue, told us, well, let's get in the car. Let's go for a ride. The terrain around Las Cruces is so isolated that if a person wanted to hide something out there or someone out there, they could very easily do it.
Jesse Avalos took Detective Cortez to a remote location in the desert. Jesse pointed out a site where Desnoyers had burned incriminating items. What Cortez found in the ashes was chilling. There were remnants of clothing and accessories, metal zippers and rivets, eyeglasses, and a woman's lipstick and compact case. One item was particularly telling.
The main thing that caught our attention was keys which did not burn. They were keys which we knew was Carly's dorm room number. About 2.5 miles. Advise task force, like if you can contact me.
Jesse told Detective Cortez that Jason killed Carly and burned her personal items in an attempt to destroy the evidence.
This is his first statement that he really ties Jason as far as getting Carly and killing her.
Jesse tried to retrace Jason's steps on the night Carly was killed, but it was dark and they weren't able to locate the young woman.
Contact me on my cell phone.
But even without a body, Detective Cortez knew they were close to breaking the case.
At least here we have Jesse talking to us, and at least we have a location to work with.
Detectives then had a difficult task. They called Carly's parents in to identify the items found at the burn site. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez confirmed the keys and the earrings were their daughters. And then Detective Cortez got an important call.
Get your hands up now! Now! Get them behind your head!
Hands up! Behind your head! Behind your head!
Step towards me!
Move away!
Keep walking! Lay down across the rail! Down! Get on the rail!
The early morning hours of March 17th, I get a call that Jason Desnoyers had been located just outside of San Diego, California. The deputy just happened to recognize Jason from one of the flyers of the mugshots. Just by luck that we were able to locate and arrest Jason.
Jason Desnoyers was transported back to Las Cruces and formally booked for the murder of Carly Martinez.
All right, just come on in. We're going right to your left.
Once Jason was in custody, they then arrested Jesse Avalos on tampering with evidence.
Take one cuff off.
Investigators knew that without a body, it would be more difficult, but not impossible, to convict them of murder.
It was very important to find this body. Not only to the family, which was a big concern for us, because we still needed to prosecute these subjects.
Police led an extensive search around the burn site. Hundreds of search personnel were on hand to attempt to locate the remains. Given the vastness of the desert, authorities knew the search could take weeks. And through it all, Detective Cortez continued to pit one suspect against the other, convinced it was only a matter of time before one of them broke down.
We decided that we would meet up with Jesse and tell him, hey, we located Jason. He's putting the blame on you now, Jesse. Jesse tells us, well, I'll tell you. I'll come up clean now and tell you where she is. I'll take you straight to her body. We told Jesse, okay, here's your last and final chance.
Started as a grid search, and we'll coordinate with us, the 3 canines, how we want to do it. Keep your radio on where we can communicate with you.
Jesse Avalos again showed detectives several areas where he thought the body was located. Even with the help of university police, border patrol agents, and search dogs, they found nothing. So Detective Cortez came up with one more strategy.
On our way out, we made sure that Jesse did see Jason and that this was no bluff. All right, Jason, you're up. Good luck.
After seeing Jesse Avalos helping police, Jason Desnoyers now began accusing his friend of the murder. He claimed he could show police where Avalos had buried the body. Jason now led detectives to various locations, but Carly's body was not found. Frustrated, officials continued to search on their own. Finally, the rescue team made a gruesome discovery not far from the burn site.
We heard over our police radio that one of our civilian search and rescue horsemen had located what he believed was to be a body.
Cortez and his team of investigators quickly went to the scene. They confirmed that it was the body of a young female. After 67 days of investigation, police had finally found the missing college student.
When we got there, we knew it was Carly. Finally, we found her.
The body was exposed to the harsh desert elements for over 2 months and was badly decomposed. It was removed for autopsy. Police believed the forensic evidence gained at autopsy would not only reveal how she died, but also secure the conviction of her killers. The Las Cruces, New Mexico police had arrested Jason Desnoyers and Jesse Avalos in connection with the disappearance and murder of college freshman Carly Martinez. Over 2 months of investigation came to an end after police discovered Carly's body at a remote desert site. The body was transported to the coroner's office for autopsy. Medical investigator Patricia McFeely's first objective was to make a positive identification of the body. Dental records easily confirmed the victim was Carly Martinez. An initial assessment of the body revealed signs of sexual assault and 27 knife wounds.
Well, we were looking for the cause of death. In her, there were multiple areas of injury. She had stab wounds of the chest, and she had stab wounds of the head, and she had some blunt trauma also in the head area.
Dr. Vince Steffen, a specialist in skeletal biology and forensic anthropology, was asked to examine the wounds. He was asked to determine the type of weapon used.
At the time, the decedent had been out in the desert for a couple months, so she was in an advanced state of decomposition. So looking at the outer wounds on the skin may not necessarily have given a good indication of what actually happened in those areas.
McFeely and Steffen ordered x-rays of the wounds. They discovered a tiny piece of metal embedded in the skull. It proved to be the tip of a knife.
See the perforation.
Then they found evidence that another weapon was used.
Okay. Then there was a second pattern of trauma that was consistent with some other type of object. It left a clear impression that it was not made by a knife.
Stephan and McFeely speculated that the other instrument matched the pattern of a set of needle-nosed pliers. 2 weapons could mean 2 attackers, and any one of the wounds could have caused Carly's death.
It would suggest that either 2 people were doing something or one person had one instrument for some reason, put that one down and picked up another.
Investigators knew the second scenario was unlikely. With this analysis and the other evidence, police reconstructed how the murder took place. That evening, after skating, Desnoyers and Avalos took Carly out into the desert to continue their drinking, and then raped her.
Desert.
We believe that when they got Carly with them in the truck, sitting in between them, they were in control. They figured they could have their way with her, which, consisted of raping her because of what they had done to her at that point, that they couldn't just let her go.
They then killed her and left her body in a remote location, hoping she'd never be found.
Come here!
It was not the ending Detective Cortez had hoped for.
Here we had an 18-year-old college girl just starting her life away from home for the first time. And just saying, how this could happen to anyone's daughter, anyone's child.
Jesse Avalos was convicted of first-degree murder. He received a life sentence. Jason Desnoyers was also convicted and is currently serving a life sentence. Some killers prey on those they know, gaining their trust and making the crimes easier to commit. Others rely on the vulnerability of strangers in need. Virginia's highways offer scenic views of the surrounding countryside. But on the morning of January 23, 1995, along a remote stretch, a grisly discovery was made.
911, where's your emergency?
Shortly before dawn, 911 operators in Washington County received a call about a lifeless body near Interstate 81.
Central 835. Need you to respond to I-81 northbound, just before exit 10.
The responding officer found a half-dressed female lying in the middle of the road. The Washington County Crime Scene Unit processed the area. Crime techs photographed the site and canvassed for evidence.
More blood stains here.
Investigators were unable to identify the victim at the scene. They did not find a purse or any identification. Police also recovered a plastic grocery bag. It had been partially wrapped around the victim's head. More evidence was found close by. A pair of pants believed to be the victim's.
3 pieces of paper.
In the pocket was a slip of paper. On it was written 2 phone numbers, both out of state.
Gainesville on it, 304, I believe is Florida.
The pieces of evidence were bagged and sent to the state crime lab. Investigators also found another important piece of evidence. A set of bloody tire tracks. Detective Kenneth Wilson investigated the case.
There was some obvious tire tread marks that led from the lady's body out toward the northbound ramp of I-81 North and on down the ramp. It became obvious that the vehicle had run over the lady's legs.
Forensic technicians photographed the tracks. It was evident they were made by a very large truck. Detective Ross Sheets also worked the case.
Appeared to be The tracks left on the roadway when he ran over the victim's right leg left marks that appeared to be that of a tractor and trailer. The diameter and the revolution of the tire led us to believe that, in fact, it was a tractor and trailer.
Pull back, and after a while, it left.
Detectives canvassed the rural area to see if anyone had heard anything unusual. Police found one man who remembered hearing a truck around 3 a.m. He told police he heard the truck idling for several minutes. Then he heard it turn around and drive back onto the interstate. The man was a mechanic who worked on tractor trailers. He did not see the vehicle, but he was confident the engine was a Peterbilt motor. Thinking the trucker might still be in the area, police moved quickly. They advised way stations along the interstate that a possible murder suspect might be traveling northbound in a semi-truck with a Peterbilt motor.
We also notified the Virginia State Police, the West Virginia State Police, the Maryland State Police, and North Carolina State Police to also be on the lookout for any tractor and trailer that may have signs of blood or hair or human tissue on that vehicle.
At the way stations, attendants looked closely at each tractor trailer. The search turned up nothing unusual. The Washington County Coroner's Office conducted the autopsy of the body, officially noted as Jane Doe. The medical examiner determined the victim was between 40 and 50 years old. There were marks on her neck that indicated she was strangled. X-rays revealed the victim's neck was broken. The ME also suspected sexual assault, but no foreign DNA was recovered. The medical examiner concluded that due to the presence of insects and the level of decomposition, the victim had been dead for about 12 hours before she was left on the road. Forensic specialists took fingerprints and palm prints of the victim, hoping to identify her. Both sets of prints were run through several national databases. A match was located in Bloomington, Indiana. The victim was identified as 45-year-old Wanda Jean Turner. Police learned her prints were in the system due to a prior arrest on a trespassing charge. Authorities now needed to locate Wanda's family and notify them of her death. When they spoke to them, they also hoped to gather additional information about her background to aid the investigation.
She was known to hang out at various truck stops and would travel from various parts of the country just by means of riding with truckers.
But her family didn't give detectives much to go on. They had not seen or heard from her in months. With very little to guide them, investigators would have to trace Wanda's movements in the days and hours leading up to her death. They looked to the phone numbers found in her pocket. One of the numbers was a taxi cab company in Gainesville, Florida. Investigators contacted the Gainesville Police Department and asked for assistance. They hoped someone at the cab company would remember Wanda. Gainesville police showed photographs of Wanda to the cab drivers. One man recognized her. The cab driver told police he took her to the bus station around 11 a.m. on January 22nd. He remembered that she only carried a plastic grocery bag. But Wanda did not mention where she was headed.
We lost her trail then and everything went cold, but the last place we could place her alive was in Gainesville, Florida, getting on a bus.
Detective Sheets believed the victim's body was dumped in Virginia about 16 hours later. The investigation, expanded to 5 states, stretched the resources of the Washington County Sheriff's Office.
And we sent detectives out in different directions, going to every truck stop, basically from Roanoke, Virginia to Gainesville, Florida, distributing these posters and requesting any and all information.
They hoped someone had seen Wanda Turner with a truck driver. But no one remembered seeing her, and the case slowly grew cold. Then, less than a month after Wanda Turner's murder, a body of a woman was found off an interstate near Greensboro, North Carolina. The crime scenes were eerily similar. Once again, the victim was partially nude, and her body had been run over by a truck. If the same killer was responsible for both crimes, there could be more to come. Police knew they needed to work quickly before more women turned up dead. As Virginia detectives were piecing together the murder investigation of 45-year-old Wanda Jean Turner, another body was found in North Carolina. The newly discovered victim was found partially nude, abandoned near an interstate. Both crime scenes were similar, and investigators believed they were looking for one killer. The medical examiner determined this victim was strangled like the first. The victim's fingerprints were processed through the national database, and like the first victim, she too had a record for a minor offense. She was positively identified as Cindy Barkley from Georgia. Police tracked down Cindy's family. They said Cindy was living in Florida and didn't keep in constant contact. Although the last time she called, she said she was going to visit relatives in Maryland. That was about 2 months before. When she phoned, she was at a truck stop and said she was doing fine.
I'm gonna just be like, a couple weeks, and then I gotta go. I really, I gotta go.
13.
Since the phone calls home were so infrequent, no one reported her missing, and there were no more leads. Exactly 1 month later, in Kingsport, Tennessee, another woman was found dead off an interstate. She was discovered 30 miles from the first victim. To Detective Sheets, there was no doubt the murders were all related.
Crime scenes were similar. The girl seemed to be positioned on a roadway, and her clothes were pulled down.
The victim's prints were processed. She was identified as Tina Madsen. And like the previous 2 victims, Tina had been strangled. Police from 5 states organized a task force to compare evidence. By working together, they hoped to speed up the search, leading them to a suspect.
We have the address of the...
But so far, they had nothing.
We're going to go just as soon as we...
Although investigators believed the killer drove a truck with a Peterbilt engine, they had no idea who he was or how to find him.
Research the record.
Extremely difficult to identify a suspect in this case. There's a million or so truck drivers in this country and millions of trucks, and just like a long shot to find a suspect.
At the Virginia State Crime Lab in Roanoke, forensic scientists pored over the only physical evidence they had: a receipt, a piece of paper, and a plastic bag. Fingerprint specialist Andrew Johnson examined the evidence, but was unable to develop any prints on the receipt or piece of paper. He then looked at the plastic bag found wrapped around the victim's head.
Actually, a plastic bag is a surface very conducive for latent prints. It's rather slick, it's non-porous, and if the individual that touches it has perspiration or an oily substrate on their hand, will leave a very good latent print.
Johnson placed the bag in a sealed chamber. He then put cyanoacrylate, or superglue, in a small tin and set it inside a chamber to heat and release the vapors. The glue evaporates and adheres to the oily prints, which glow under an alternate light source. After 3 long months and just as many victims, Andrew Johnson made the discovery he believed would turn the case.
After photographing the latent print, I took the photograph and made a 5-time enlargement of the latent print. And then a tracing is done of the minutia on the latent print and transferred to a piece of acetate.
Investigators ran the prints through Virginia's fingerprint identification system. But to their surprise, the database didn't turn up anything.
Missouri, Alabama.
The fingerprints were their only link to the suspect. Police believed they were looking for a trucker, and now they needed to find another way to track him down.
Similar crime scenes have been observed.
Okay, we've developed a media release.
They made copies of the fingerprints taken from the plastic bag and submitted them to jurisdictions across the country.
People who can answer phone calls with this particular evidence we have. A lot of the...
And just when they were losing hope of ever finding the killer, their luck changed. Across the country, in Arkansas, investigators got a hit. A serial killer was on the loose. 3 murders were linked to the same perpetrator who traveled the interstates in search of unsuspecting women. The only clue connected to the crimes was a fingerprint found on a grocery bag. And after months of coming up empty, investigators finally got a match. The suspect had been arrested in Arkansas on a minor charge several years earlier. The print belonged to Sean Goebel of Asheboro, North Carolina. Investigator Sheets of the Washington County, Virginia Sheriff's Office was optimistic that he was their killer.
He was a tractor and trailer truck driver, so we thought we had our man.
Hey, Charlie, listen, I've got some things I got to take care of. I'll get back with
Detective
you later
Kenneth
today.
Wilson went to North Carolina and questioned the suspect's supervisor. Goebel was out on the road and was due back at any time. The supervisor confirmed that Goebel not only drove a tractor trailer, he drove one with a Peterbilt engine. But Goebel's co-workers could not believe he was a cold-blooded killer.
Goebel was known throughout his department as a calm, easygoing, friendly, but somewhat lonely truck driver, but he had a good reputation.
Investigators obtained the trucker's travel logs to see if there was any correlation between the location of the bodies and the suspect's whereabouts.
We determined that he was in the vicinity of a lot of murders that occurred across the country, especially the ones that we were looking at here locally.
When Goebel showed up, detectives were there to meet him.
Police, come here.
He did not seem surprised. There was very little reaction from him. But once we told him he was under arrest and the charge he was being arrested for, he was somewhat surprised.
Goebel denied any involvement in the murders.
Mr. Goebel, as we told you before,
He told police he never met any of the victims.
I don't think I've seen her before.
While Goebel was detained at the Winston-Salem Police Department, investigators processed his truck. Inside, they found a purse containing the driver's license of the last victim, Tina Madsen. They also collected numerous strands of hair. And they found what appeared to be blood. When detectives confronted Goebel with the evidence found in his truck and on the plastic bag, he admitted he had picked up the women, but claimed they were alive when he dropped them off. Police then obtained a search warrant for his home. Inside his bedroom closet, they made a gruesome discovery. Police found purses, women's shoes and underwear, and other personal items. Investigators believed Goebel was collecting souvenirs from each victim. With evidence mounting against him, Sean Goebel ultimately confessed to the 3 murders.
There was a plastic bag. He looked at us for just a moment or two, and he conceded that it was him. His reaction from then on out was somewhat subtle. He was very cooperative. His response was really, I'm glad this is over, but I'd like to just get it behind me and get back out on the road.
But Detective Wilson knew he wasn't going anywhere.
Okay, Mr. Goebel.
Goebel told police what happened the night he picked up Wanda Turner. Near Virginia, Wanda asked the trucker for a ride.
Want a party?
He said he agreed and killed her. Then he put the plastic bag over her head to keep the blood from getting on the seats. The confession gave investigators more than they needed to bring the killer to justice.
We started the crime scene with 3 pieces of paper and 2 telephone numbers in a plastic bag. Like a million in one shot trying to locate this individual.
His confessions allowed Goebel to avoid the death penalty. He received 3 consecutive life sentences. Killers can lure unwitting victims, blindly gaining their confidence and trust in order to commit murder. Yet forensics can reconstruct the details of their crimes and piece together the evidence needed to convict, exposing the perpetrator's lies and bringing them to justice.